Well, hello everyone. Welcome to this new Lucid webinar today. We're really excited to have you. My name is Jeff Rosenbaugh,
And I am Christopher Bailey.
and we're thrilled to have folks jumping in to participate with us right now. So, as we get started, we're going to give it just a little bit of time. We're going to warm up the crowd. I guess that's kind of our MO. So while you're coming in, if you can do us a solid, we'd love to know where you're coming from, what company you're working for. Maybe go ahead and throw that into the chat. Make sure too, it says to, you have different places you can send that information to. You can send it to the host and panelists, or you can send it to everyone. Send it to everybody. Let's know who all is here. Again, let us know where you're coming from, the company you're working for. We'd love to get to know you a little bit. Just to introduce ourselves briefly, Christopher, do you want to introduce yourself, and then I'll cover myself?
Yeah, I've been with Lucid for a couple of years, spent 15 years prior to that at a big Fortune 5 company doing agile transformations and new product development and a lot of the things that our customers use Lucid toward. So what I get to do here is help our customers leverage Lucid towards those same kinds of ends and realize great results from that. So excited to be here.
Fantastic. And my name is Jeff Rosenbaugh. That is how you pronounce my last name if you're seeing it on the screen and wondering. I have been here at Lucid for about 3.5 years as well. I absolutely love it here. I love our products. I love our teams. I run a professional services organization. Professional services is everything from the things that Christopher was talking about. He works as a member of my team, as well as product education, if you've ever met our wonderful trainers, or our implementation team, who go and help customers get onto our platform for the first time. In terms of background around agility and why I have a little bit of credibility in this, like Christopher, I worked at a Fortune 5 organization. I actually led the majority of the Agile transformation while I was as kind of my last role before leaving and joining Lucid, which was really exciting. We dealt with a lot of unique challenges, being a very, very large organization, trying to implement agility. Prior to that, did quite a bit with lean startup innovation as well, which has a lot of similarities with agility and continuous improvement. And so really strong background doing this for a bit. I've spoken at the Agile conference several times and am kind of perpetually engaged with folks in that scene. And so today we're really excited to talk about our topic here, which is making work visible for Agile teams. But before we get started, let's cover maybe a couple of housekeeping items. I know some of this is important for all of you, so we'll make sure that we are clear on this. Number one, first and foremost, this webinar is totally being recorded, so you can expect an email with a link to that recording within a few days. It'll be sent to the email whichever email you use to register for this webinar. So keep your eyes out for that. That email is also going to include some additional resources, including a blog post, some additional information about our products and how they integrate, and potentially some information about our professional services organization, which is, again, Christopher and I, and how we help customers get more value from Lucid on a daily basis. We also don't want this webinar to be just us talking at you. That's a little bit of what's happening right now. Completely recognize that. But we want to hear from you. So please hop into the chat, share your thoughts. Let us know what's going on. We will have, we've tried to segment some time for Q&A at the end. So we'll do our best to make sure that we get there. And if you have any questions that are specific for the Lucid team, please use the Q&A function in Zoom. So slightly different, not just your chat, but hit Q&A. And that's going to help our Lucid team, we have a handful of people on today, be able to stay on top of those questions and answer as many as they can. And just a big shout out to that group. We really appreciate them doing that so that we can focus on getting through some of this awesome content today. And then finally, live captions are enabled for this webinar. So if you need those, would like those, go ahead and turn those on. And you can hopefully better understand me as I slur through my speech. I didn't get all of those vocal warm-ups in before we got started today. But with that background now in place, with the foundations of what we're going to do today, let's jump into our topic and get going. So let's start grounding ourselves in the principles of Agile. Why are we even talking about this? At its core, Agile is about delivering value through collaboration, adaptability, and customer centricity. But what ties all of those elements together is transparency. Without transparency, it's really impossible to collaborate effectively or adapt quickly. Teams operate in the dark, and decision-making slows down. In fact, transparency isn't just about nice to haves, it's foundational to the success of any high-performing Agile team. When we talk about visibility in Agile, we're not just talking about tracking tasks or updating progress on a board. Those are very important. We're talking about visibility is about so much more than that. It's about empowering teams, giving everyone access to the right information at the right time so that they can make informed decisions, work autonomously, and align their efforts with larger goals. So when everyone is clear on the same view of what's happening, whether it's priorities, blockers, or progress, teams are better equipped to succeed. So that's why this concept of making work visible is so critical. It bridges that gap between strategy and execution, ensuring that the work happening on the ground aligns with what the organization's broader priorities might be. Visibility also doesn't just improve day-to-day productivity, it's a driver for long-term success. So without it, you can't really measure progress, identify opportunities for improvement, or ensure ongoing alignment. And here's the thing, teams are becoming more complex. You've heard this before. We're probably reiterating something that you hear on a regular basis, but we're working across geographies, time zones, and even functions. Hybrid and remote teams have added a lot of layers of complexity to how we communicate and collaborate together. So in those environments, visibility isn't just important, it becomes absolutely essential to be able to do your job. So when you can't rely on a quick hallway conversation or seeing someone's desk piled up with sticky notes or a giant whiteboard at the end of a planning session, you need tools, practices that ensure everyone, no matter where they sit, has access to the same clear view of whatever's going on. So as we dive in today, think about the role visibility plays within your own teams. Is it helping your team stay aligned and move quickly? Or are there gaps that could be holding you back? Our goal today is to give you some practical strategies to make work more visible so that your teams, whether they're in the office, fully remote, or somewhere in between, can thrive.
Absolutely. And one of the things that you all are probably thinking about as we talk about visibility is the backlog, the work itself, the listing of the work that needs to actually get done. And we want to broaden our minds just outside of that. That is absolutely true. But it can also mean the status of things and where they're at any given point, or the decisions that were made in order to come to some resolution or making progress towards a specific goal. So let's broaden our minds as we think about visibility. It's more than just the backlog of work that we want to talk about. So with that broader view in mind, we've got a question for you all.
Yeah, and I think it's really important, again, we want to make sure that this is a bi-directional conversation as much as it can be, given the format that we're using today. But we want to hear from all of you. What is the most challenging thing for you in making your work visible? This is inherently a very generic question because there's a lot of different people here with a lot of different backgrounds coming from a lot of different places. And so we want to hear from you. When somebody talks about this inside of your organization, whether it be an Agile coach, a Scrum Master, you yourself as you're working with your team, like what are the things that are really sticky for you and that you spend a lot of time thinking about, like, how do we do this better? So we'd love to hear that. So I'm gonna look over separate screen. I'm still paying attention. Separate screen to read some of your thoughts here. So being transparent, asking questions, understanding cross-functional impacts. That's a great one. Where to look, where should teams even go? Yeah, absolutely. Like the data can be all over the place. Each tier, team, management, executive have different wants for what they want to see. Absolutely, that is the case. Anytime you're trying to scale agility and scale impact of teams like that being able to speak to those different layers becomes really, really challenging. Translating between teams. It's as if each team speaks a different language. That's fantastic. And actually, we are going to talk about that. So I think that's really great. Chris, are there any in here that are standing out to you?
No, I mean that was the main one, was this idea here of translation. And that's the beauty of visual collaboration, is that it now enables us to jump past that. So we're excited to talk about that one.
This is great. And so Lucid team, I'd love some of these. Grab the ones that you think are really great, and we'll make sure that we cover some of these as we go. We'll kind of keep an eye on this. But wow, thank you all so much for dumping so many different thoughts in here. Completing priorities, gosh. Yeah, like how do you make that visible? How do you make those ties? How do you make those ties visible? Okay, thank you so much for contributing to that. And if you've got additional thoughts, continue to throw them in the chat there so that we can address it. But as for today's agenda, we're going to talk about three main pillars, topics, whatever framing you want to put on. I'm not really great at like framing
Squiggles, something.
whatever. But we're going to talk about three things and kind of dig into those a little bit more. We could talk about, honestly, we would talk about this topic all day, but we only have a very limited amount of time. So here's where we're going to focus. First, we're going to talk about shared real-time visibility of work, what that looks like, and some core things you can do there. Clear ongoing communication on priorities and expectations. Okay, right? I've seen a lot of things in the chat about priorities, expectation management, things like that. That's a really great one, so we'll dive into that. And then the last section that we'll go through is a culture of open feedback and reflection. So for folks in the Agile community, that's not going to be a surprise that we'll lean into that, but we may talk about it slightly differently than it sometimes gets talked about, or at least that's the goal. That is the goal. All right, let's jump into the first one. So the first pillar we're going to explore, again, is shared real-time visibility of work. Agile teams thrive on collaboration and adaptability, but neither is possible without a clear shared understanding of what's happening within the team. Real-time visibility is about giving every team member access to the same clear picture: who's working on what, where things stand, and where potential blockers may arise. It's that shared clarity that's helping teams move faster, stay aligned, and build trust. But creating this visibility doesn't happen by accident. I think we've all seen this. Like, this is not an inherently native thing for human beings to do. It takes some intentional effort to make sure that teams aren't just managing the work, but they're actually working from the same consistent view, and working out loud is the phrase that I've heard in the past, which I really, really like. So when that happens, it becomes much easier to surface blockers, adapt to changing priorities, and even empower distributed teams to collaborate more seamlessly. So Chris, why don't you take us through some of these keys to success and give us a few thoughts here?
Yeah. So we're going to give you, as a part of each one of these, a couple of key thoughts for how to get started in some of these. We want to make this practical. You can take some things away. The first thing is to create a consistent visual language. And what we mean by that is creating visuals either in a specific structure where people know in the upper left-hand corner, I look for these kinds of things, or a specific format that we're reusing, so that whether you have a new team member that's coming in and needs to quickly digest so that they can hit the ground running really fast, or it's a leader that's coming in and trying to digest and get a sense for where can I be most helpful? Where are the blockers? How do I help remove those blockers for the organization? They know immediately where to look because we've created that consistency around the visual language itself.
Yeah, and to double click into that just slightly, it's not just the visual language like per team, but it's also the visual language as you kind of scale across your organization or your department, whatever size and scope that might be, so that, you know, if you've got a leader coming in, they know that team A through team E, like I was going to go Z, I was like, that's quite a bit of teams. Maybe they're not
That's a
looking at
lot.
things. But, you know, as they're looking at that handful of teams, there's some level of consistency when they drop in and they see things. Or if you're frequently reorganizing your engineers that kind of support whatever you're building from a product standpoint, say you're a product R&D organization, you know, as they move around, like having a standard, consistent visual language, consistent templatization of some of those things makes it really easy for people to plug and play into different teams, or even if it's just a cross-functional effort, better understand what may be happening. And so this is I'm sure several have seen this, but like it's that consistent view, just like creating a speed of absorption of information so that you're not worried about getting up to speed so much as contributing value.
Yeah. And maybe to actually pair this, because this dovetails really well, the third bullet in here, balancing customization with team consistency.
Mm.
You don't want to overstructure that visual language so that people don't have the ability to personalize things or help it feel like it's relatable to them as well. You still want that flexibility where the team can make decisions. You're empowering the teams or programs to be able to communicate in ways that make sense for them, but you're creating those anchor points in the visual language so that individuals can come in and they can quickly digest and absorb information through it.
Yeah, I think one of the first things that you could do to really frustrate a bunch of teams is tell them that they can't have some personalization. In fact, on that note, just for fun, if the audience can put some of their favorite team names in the chat,
Ooh.
I'm always surprised and fall in love with some of the like crazy team names that people give themselves over time. And so, like, great example of personalization. But you know, taking that to the next degree is like if you've come up with some like super fun name, how do you go in and then personalize your stuff, make it feel like a home for your team, right? Because it can't be something that people want to engage with. Because again, you've got the human behavior here of this isn't natural, so you got to make it something that people want to engage with and get after.
Wow. I hope you're looking at these names, Jeff. These
Oh,
are
yeah, I'm looking
great
at them right
ones.
now.
Read it and Wape, Fit Gang, Wacky Work.
Oh, these are good.
Yeah, these are great. And it's always special when they create sort of a connection and meaning with the team. And so that's some of the reason that you want to strike that balance well. And a good way to start then is to start with creating those pieces that you need and then structuring them in like where that they need to go. But then allowing a lot of flexibility for that, and then adding more of that structure over time, just as we think of in the agile space, right? We're constantly iterating. Third one in here to talk through is the structure and maintaining that single source of truth. So very similar to what we think of with the backlog, where you're trying to centralize as much as you can to a single backlog of work, prioritized, all the things are right there. That's the goal. Now, in practice, we know what that actually looks like, that like, okay, there's two backlogs, but we know how to work between them and, you know, those kinds of things. So we do what we can, but similar thought applies here as well. When you're creating that language and creating that space for people to be able to connect back to, you want to centralize that as much as possible so that people know, oh, that's immediately where I go to see information. Let's think back to the days when everybody was in the office. Now you may have everybody in the office, everybody may be virtual, you may be hybrid. Either way, you had those situations where everything was up on the walls. You had all of the different pieces that somebody needed. Okay. That's a bit of what you're trying to recreate, is the benefit of that physicality in the room in more of a digital space today.
Yeah. Yeah. And sorry, this is complete tangent because I'm just absolutely loving these names. But when you said like everything up on the walls, I realized like we've gone to a world where these are the walls that we have now, which are like great Zoom backgrounds instead of necessarily like the practical, the practical information sharing or the practical like keeping all the things visible in front of me. And so we have to think about that differently.
Exactly.
Right. So just from a practical standpoint, world has changed. The things we do have changed, and so that's a great ad. So yeah, with those three things, Chris, I think I know you've got some kind of a demo that you want to show of some things that can be done in Lucid to kind of to embrace these three keys to success. So do you mind sharing some of the things that you've got there? Gosh, did not do those vocal exercises, and it's killing me.
No, you're good, man. Well, let's go. Yeah, here's a great example. Also a clever name if you're looking to beg, borrow, and steal. Steal like an artist, as we say. This is giving a bit of that idea of I've created a central space. I've created a strong visual language for the way that I want to communicate certain things, as well as the things that need to be communicated. And so here in this example, this is a Lucid Spark board that acts as a team space for a team that they can go to at any time to see the things that would have been on the walls in days of yore. So up here in the upper right-hand corner, I've got a team charter. Actually, let me just zoom in just a little bit more. We got a team charter. And I may leave a lot of flexibility for the team in there for how they actually craft and want to describe their team charter. But I do have a space, and I know that if I ever need to go in and learn real quick, I'm going to go straight here into the upper right-hand corner, or team members, which here in Lucid, I can see things like, the individual's faces, and I'm leveraging some of the features just directly within Lucid to immediately pull somebody's name or face into those. So if we have, somebody who's coming from a different team and now Christopher Bailey's on this team, I can quickly add those. So making those changes very easy. Working agreements. One of the biggest things that a team would have up on their wall, making that visible so that individuals can come in and see what are the things that are expected of me if I'm jumping into this new team. Or for a Scrum Master, how do I hold this team accountable? What is it that I need to hold them accountable to?
And Chris, we did get a note in the chat. Can you zoom in? Can you just zoom in just a little bit more on things as you do the zoom in, zoom out? It just go in a little bit deeper when you do.
Yeah.
That'd be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So here as well, we've got another area for timelines and milestones, particularly as there may be some specific dates. We're leveraging the timelines feature here within Lucid to create little cards within this that individuals can see when things are due, et cetera. So you can see a bit of that. So we like to put those things sort of at the top because that's sort of our basic structure of what's the team working on? What are we focusing on? Who are we focusing on? Maybe personas is something that you want to put up there at the very top so that people get a good understanding. On the left-hand side is where we've put some things more around work management. Maybe there's some burn down charts that we're pulling from other places that we want to display here. Or you can create other charts like velocity diagrams within Lucid, or showing our lead time and cycle time, seeing how are we doing as a team? How are we functioning as a team? Our planning and stand-up. A lot of these should actually feel a bit more like our typical sprint cycles that we're going through, where we're planning out our work in a dynamic matrix. We've got our to-do and development code review. I could be connecting this to my Jira instance or ADO and pulling that work directly in. So now I can work with it in a much more visual format than the typical listing of the things that we need to get done. And then use other dynamic matrices to see who's doing what things and what's our progress. Are we actually making progress towards this? These can be especially helpful as we're trying to get a quick sense in a stand-up of how are we doing? Do we have things that we need to be concerned about? Do we need to be talking about things? A quick review of other areas in here. We've got definitions of ready, definitions of done. This team win section can be a great place to hold your review at the end of a sprint. Team calendar, and then also reference materials. Not everything has to be directly on the board. There's plenty of resources that are needed and useful, but they live somewhere else. Maybe it lives in another document, a Lucid chart document, or maybe it's in Confluence, but you're linking all those things here so that it's easily referenceable from one place within here.
Yeah, and so if I take a zoom out of what you're talking about here, Chris, is like this. I think there's a great example of what we generally refer to as like a team space, a place where everybody can come together. Maybe there's some consistent structure from team to team. Again, going back to that, like making sure that you've got something that like people can get into, absorb information very quickly. But like within each of, maybe the structure here as I'm looking to my other screen is like these higher level frames, which is the feature set that we're using there, these higher level frames. But inside of those frames, the team can have generally whatever information is going to be really pertinent or really helpful. And maybe there's a bit of a definition of like, hey, in the work management one, we do want to see a burn down. We do want to see all these other things. And so there's setting some of that, those rules of the road for teams as you're getting them together, but like making that happen.
Exactly. Yeah. Creating the spaces and then leaving that flexibility. So that's a great way to describe that balance that you're trying to strike between each one of those. And I don't want to lose sight also of the fact that we do have in Lucid generally, actually, I'm going to pull this from a separate screen over here. We do have also Lucid team hubs as well that can act as that space for teams to be able to put that primary space. So you can organize this within a team hub to say, not only here are the different spaces that need to be filled in. This is the structure that we want to have, but there's also a consistent place to find that one resource, as well as any other key documents for that team. And here I'm actually creating that shared space where now I'm not just doing the single walls, but now I'm sort of creating the entirety of the room and capturing the things that would have been on people's desks or things of that nature.
Yeah, I think that's great because like the example that you just showed had things like, hey, you might do your sprint planning here, you might do some of those other things, but for many people, they don't necessarily want to do that in the same messy space, and that's completely fine. But but having a hub where all those documents can live together, where permissions are all set up appropriately, and everybody has all the access that you need, like that makes that allows for teams to kind of take whichever approach they want to take, whether it's multiple documents, same document, and make it their own and make it something that works for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is great. This is great. All right. Well, let's go from there. Thank you for that demo, Christopher. Let's move to our second section that we wanted to get into today, which is around clear ongoing communication. Clear ongoing communication on priorities and expectations. This is agile teams are fast moving, they're dynamic, and they're often juggling competing demands. So to stay focused on delivering the highest value work, it's essential that everyone not only understands what's most important, but also why it matters. Without that alignment, teams waste time on low priority tasks, or worse, they duplicate efforts because expectations weren't clearly communicated. And the phrase that I've often heard, I know this sounds, hopefully this doesn't sound derogatory, but like one of the phrases that I've heard over the past is like, hey, when you're not clear about expectations at a high level and you're not great at communicating that down and making sure that everybody's aligned, you're essentially delegating decision making to the lowest part of the organization, which in some cases may be fine because they might have all the information, but in a lot of cases it's not, because the ability for somebody at that level to be connected to the overall business strategy and what's happening everywhere else is very, very limited. So what makes this especially challenging in our modern times and modern teams is that we're, again, distributed across locations, time zones, and schedules. And so in that environment, priorities and expectations can't be something that you set and forget. You can't just throw up a poster on a wall or have the room where you did your PI planning or quarterly planning, and people can go back to that and take a look. Instead, teams need regular touch points and practices that keeps everybody aligned, whether through quick stand-ups, asynchronous updates, or other shared rituals. So clear communication isn't just a top-down exercise, it's a conversation, which, in the Agile community, that's something that we want. We want that conversation, right? And so how do we facilitate that more effectively? About creating a space where team members can ask questions, raise their concerns, clarify priorities as they evolve. So with this kind of ongoing dialogue, teams can navigate uncertainty with confidence and stay focused on what truly drives value. So few keys to success here. Maybe I'll take the first one, Chris, and then I'll hand it to you. But because this first one is one that I'm really passionate about, is that using highly visible information radiators that teams can reference. So this is a little bit of a connection back to the demo that we just did. But for those who are not familiar with the phrase or term information radiator, it's a highly visible, easily accessible display of critical information that helps teams stay aligned. It helps them make informed decisions, track progress in real time. That term was popularized in Agile practices by Alistair Cockburn, if you're familiar with Alistair. He emphasized that these radiators are most effective when they're simple, visual, and continuously updated. So that might include things like task boards, sprint goals, team metrics, project roadmaps, product roadmaps. What sets an information radiator apart from other documentation is its immediacy and its impact. So you're doing a lot to make sure that you've got color coordination, things like that, that can draw people's eyes to certain parts of the radiator so they know what they need to pay most attention to. It's designed to be proactive, broadcast information, so that people don't have to hunt it all down. It's also visual and intuitive, and it drives transparency, enabling everyone to spot priorities, risks, and opportunities at a glance. So think about things like Kanban boards, burn up or burn down charts, team dashboards. So for each of us, it's considering where we can dashboard something, and we do this both at the team level and at the program portfolio levels and above to make sure that we've got visibility across the organization.
Absolutely. And jumping into that next one, it sort of builds off of this. Thinking about, I want to create that visual that shows and demonstrates the results or the things we're wanting to hold ourselves accountable to. There's also the process flow that we took in getting there. And team members will regularly hear from leaders, let's make your work visible. Let's, work out loud. Let's see the progress of things. Like, we want to see those kinds of things. Well, this is the chance for individuals to say, hey, leaders, can you make your work visible back to me? Both in terms of the results, but then also the process with which we got to there. Now, obviously, you're not going to be able to share everything, but we do want to share as much as we can. And that may mean I'm structuring data in documentation or something like that that shows we did this and then we did this and then this was an aha moment for us and then we came to this end result over here. And so thinking about the ways to structure that so that people can then digest it. Quick note here, like you're likely going to have to do that afterwards. For those particularly that set up a lot of facilitated sessions, you do as much as you can to like structure everything. We're going to go through this thing and then we're going to come to a really innovative solution at the end. And we all know that about 25% of the way in, then things start to change and you go a slightly different direction because that's the way that work happens. We're going to go the direction that things are actually taking us. And so be sure to go back and make sure that that path that's being followed tracks back to yes. And that's how we got to this end result.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I think that like, it's really important. You mentioned, I love the mention of it's really important for like this is an opportunity for leaders to create visibility and transparency. But I do want to also call out, like, even as teams, like oftentimes we get the question, individual contributors and teams will get the question of like, well, how did you get to that decision, or how did you get to that outcome? And again, being able to show that and map that back out, not just for your leaders, but sometimes for new people that join the team. Like you may have like a senior engineer that comes on that's just like, wait, why did we decide to do this? And it may have been totally the right decision, but they need to walk through that a little bit to feel a little bit of the trade-offs that you dealt with. And making sure that you maintain that documentation, you keep it somewhere, saves you a ton of time and headache for those kind of conversations.
Yeah, it's especially helping you work through some of the challenges that come with a new team member where there's a lot of questioning of like, well, why are we doing it this way? And you want that. You want to be thinking in terms of better practices and how do we continue to improve. But at the same time, there may be things that, well, we just decided this. And
Right.
so we actually want to continue to try and test
Let's
this
give
thing
it
out right
some
now.
runway before we backtrack. Yeah, no,
Exactly. So making that visible can empower individuals.
and then the last one on here, just real quick. I mentioned this a little bit, but like use visual indicators of capacity blockers to communicate faster, and make sure that you're driving focus. So make things very scannable. Use things like like alert symbols or whatever if you need to call people's attention to things. Utilize capacity shapes in Lucid. Like we'll actually maybe show an example of that. I believe that's in your demo. But use those capacity shapes. So like things that people can quickly gravitate towards visually, that tell the story in a very simple fashion and draw attention. And this is a great opportunity as well for templatizing some of the things that you do to enable simulate the impacts and choices early on, so that you can test some things and see what's going on, and then on the back end make a decision. Okay, sorry, let me restate this. So like templatizing kind of the core of like what you think is important in the radiator, but like learning over time of what needs to maybe change, simulating like, hey, we're going to maybe A/B test a little bit, like the way that we use these radiators, we use these visuals, and then iterating on that over time.
Yeah. One quick thought, and then we'll jump into the demo for this. This should feel somewhat similar to the conversation that we just had about centralizing the information, leveraging visuals that like help to communicate things. We're essentially saying do the same kind of thing, but here's some nuances that happen at a leadership level when you're trying to communicate that so that you're able to better empower teams. Let's demo this. I'll show you a quick example of this using OKRs, objectives and key results. OKRs are a great way to be able to highlight to teams and individuals the status of things, where we want to focus, and why we want to focus in on those things. So great work that you can go out and read more. Lots of great literature out there on OKRs. Highly recommend taking a look at that if you're not using them right now. But the general idea here is with OKRs, you're going to need to build them out, and then you're going to need to share them so that you can hold the team accountable and they can get a sense for where we need to focus. So here we have an example of an OKR planning board where, again, you're structuring out a bit of the decision-making process and the steps that you're going to go through. You're also open to things changing and shifting over time. So naturally, you may choose to do some different things in here as you go throughout the conversation. So here in the upper left, we've got identifying potential objectives. And I've got a place where I can just quickly come in here and start ideating on different opportunities or solutions. Then we can come in and use a visual activity to drag each one of those into here, have individuals come in and they can each vote on, this is using Moscow prioritization, of what are the must-haves for this next quarter that we need to focus on as far as our OKRs.
Yeah, and I love visual activities. Do you mind saving the changes on that? So essentially what Chris has done so far is he's put their blank stickies for the sake of, let's use imagination. We'll have an imagination minute. So imagine all those stickies have great ideas for key results or things that you want to measure. But once you drag those into that left-hand box there, and then once you get in, you can come in and you can have everybody individually put those stickies into the different frames of the Moscow matrix. And then when you save that on the back end, you get everybody's results and you can look at them individually. You can also do this anonymously, which I know a lot of Agile teams care about because maybe it's not something like this where like visibility is not an issue, but maybe it's something like a retrospective where you want to keep things a little bit more personal and private. You can use anonymity to get to that outcome. But I love this because it can give you a really clear view of like, hey, where is their consensus? Where is their non-consensus? consensus? What are the general ideas of the group? And so this is really powerful. And not only having like this as a feature you can use to get to that outcome, but having the results of this very visible on the board after you've gone through the planning. Again, talking about transparency. Here's why we made the decisions. Most everybody was aligned. This is something that we must have when
Mhm.
we went through the conversation. And so being able to see that, and at minimum the ratios and things like that, is really important.
Absolutely. Yeah. Love visual activities here. And it can spin you off then into that conversation more detailed about, well, if these are the objectives we're focusing in on, what are the key results that we want to be looking for? What are the measures that we're doing? Further using things like mind maps in order to connect those pieces together. So in this case, we've got a couple of different objectives that we're naming, and then some, words around a KR that we may want to do. And there you can also show that connection between the relationship between the things that we're trying to measure and the goal that we're trying to go after, which is core to objectives and key results. This last section here is then essentially putting it into a bit of the format that you're going to use in that information radiator on the other side.
Yep.
So this, I'll jump into this one here in just a second, but it's sort of an idea here of taking this entire pathway and then saying, here's how we're actually going to get there. Now, you can communicate that aspect of it to a team through an information radiator somewhat like this, where I'm communicating our purpose and strategy and the stakeholders in the organization. Here are the different objectives and the key results. Each one of these shapes here is a key result that we're measuring a number of different elements with regards to it. Maybe there's other initiatives that we need to do with regards to this. In this one specifically, if I look at these key results, you can describe specific elements of it, but then using things like dynamic shapes that we've actually coded this here on the back end for these specific shapes. If the value goes below a certain amount, like 50, you can see it turns yellow. Or maybe if it goes down to 25, it's still fine. But if it goes down below 10, then now it's red.
Right.
This is another way of easily using that visual communication style to communicate something simply to a group. So that's a bit of what you want to think about when you're considering, how do I put this into an information radiator that people can visually just look through and quickly get a sense of, this is something that we need to focus in or not. You may use other things like conditional formatting within Lucid to highlight things. This is using a dynamic shape in this case, but conditional formatting is a great way to also do this. Or linking this to data. If this is all coming from a back-end set of data, use data linking. Link it to these shapes here, and then get all of this information here to auto-populate. Great approaches for each one of these. I see a couple of questions here in the chat generally around like, how do I get some of these templates? So there are plenty of templates like these ones in Lucid. So our team will help share a couple of different examples. The ones that we're specifically highlighting here are some of our premium templates that our professional services teams have built out for organizations. So if you're wanting to get access to any of these, then reach out to us. We can help connect you with our professional services to get access to some of these ones as well.
That's a great call out. That's a great call out. And a lot of teams there I saw a couple questions in there as well, like how easy is it to modify some of these things to tailor it to the specifics of what you're needing? The short answer is we think it's fairly straightforward. But if you do need help for that, that's also another reason why we are here to help support that. If you ever need to reach out to professional services or even just ask a question of our support teams to get some initial insight. So wonderful. Thank you. That was a great demo. Let's jump into the last section here to make sure that we reserve some time for Q&A at the end, because I'm already seeing a few questions coming up. Let's talk about a culture of open feedback and reflection. So transparency flourishes in environments where people feel comfortable sharing their honest feedback. Regular retrospectives or feedback sessions allow teams to discuss what's working, address misunderstandings, and adapt. It's often said in Agile circles that the retrospective in particular is the most important of all Agile ceremonies. If you haven't heard that, you've now heard that today. I tend to believe that is true, maybe not to the degree of others, but I definitely think that it is probably the most important, because it's all about getting your team to be transparent and to create visibility to what's working and what's not working. It enables ongoing alignment and continuous improvement, which is the core and foundation of anything that we ever talk about with Agile, even in dispersed and remote teams.
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the things too, building off of retrospectives, we want to keep in mind here is that that is a great, and I also agree. It's sort of the thing that I look for in a team. If they have that, then they're going to be successful because they can adapt from there. But there may need to be other feedback loops as well. And so let's keep that sort of broader set here in mind as we think through this. These are a couple of different ways that this may actually show up. So first thing is to create the space for vulnerability. We mean this in terms of like, yes, let's help people to feel comfortable using private mode as Jeff had mentioned before, but let's actively work towards a place where individuals can have that conversation between themselves. Isn't it awkward when like you're hearing third person from somebody else that so and so had feedback for you and you're sitting there wondering, well, why couldn't they just talk to me? Creating a bit of that space can take some time. It takes building trust in order to get to that end state where people can feel comfortable with that. But start with private mode and then move to things like visual activities where you're starting to open it up a little bit, or just blank canvases where we're now just sharing things of how we're feeling about different results that we've gotten to throughout that entire sprint.
Yeah, and I think that this is a core challenge. This is a very human challenge of how do you start moving this direction. And so, I think I saw something in the Q&A, and maybe we can address it more more holistically toward the end of the session today, but like around like how do you get started with some of this? And I think that you made a great point of start somewhere. Start somewhere, even if it's a very anonymous you're trying to create a ton of anonymity just to get people to speak up a little bit. Like at some point, too, like I've seen this time and again, is even when people contribute anonymously, what they wrote might be misinterpreted. And then that might be the impetus for them to be like, no, 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 this is really important for me. I'm going to go ahead and speak up. And then giving that person a ton of credit for speaking up, being like, hey, like, I know you contributed that anonymously. Thank you so much for clarifying that and speaking up. That was really, really helpful that you did that, so that they feel really good about it, but it also creates that open space of like, yeah, that's exactly what we're trying to do. So it's a little bit of that, it depending on the culture that you come from, maybe you can jump right into everybody's doing this together. But in other cases, you may have to start with that very kind of, maybe more locked down anonymous situation.
Right.
Yeah.
What Jeff's actually hinting at here is actually a bit of this next one of like that leader demonstrating vulnerability and highlighting another individual and thanking them, helping them to feel comfortable with that. Hopefully you can get to the point where team members are doing that. Like that's where you want to go. But you're likely going to have to start off with doing that as a leader. Maybe you need to seed some things that are touchy scenarios. I've had to do that in the past where like people are bringing some stuff up to me and I say, I'd like you to specifically bring that up in our retrospective. And then I'm gonna immediately chime in afterwards and support us talking through this because I want it to be safe for us to do that. Or maybe you have to be the one that admits some mistakes that you've made or things that you wish had gone better so that it makes it more okay for other people that may be, stuck in a little bit of pride cycle that like they can also bring up some things of that nature too.
I think that's good. And at the same time, as individual contributors on a team, so if you're not in a leadership position, don't ignore this one and say that's not for me because I'm not a leader, I'm not a manager, I'm not a whatever. But even as an individual contributor, sometimes it's showing the grace back to the leader so that they can do that. Because if you want a culture of transparency, vulnerability, and being able to do this, and you feel like your leader's not doing it, they're human. They may also be they may feel as though when they create that when they come to the team and they apologize for something, or they come to the team and they do something, they may feel heavily judged. And so even in those moments, how do you extend a little bit of grace or a little bit of empathy to that person so that they feel open with that? Because yes, in a lot of ways, leaders have to set the stage, but because they're human, we can ruin that for them if we don't treat it the right way when they make that attempt.
Exactly. Well, one of the things that we can do as well, just generally as teams, whether you're a leader or not, is to think and communicate in terms of better practices. And this comes from Adam Grant's work. So go read the book if you haven't already. Great work there. But the idea is that there's always something that can change. There's always something better. And so if we keep that growth mindset, thinking in terms of better practices rather than best practices that are locked in and now we've achieved it, that can create that openness to having something that we want to work towards.
Well, yeah, and I would just say, as agilists in the world, I'm going to make a broad assumption that most people on this call consider themselves some level of agilist. Like, you shouldn't. Best practices is kind of antithetical to continuous
Yeah.
improvement, right? So I think just thinking in that framing is helpful for all the work that you're trying to do, regardless of whether we're talking about visibility or anything else. So I think that's great.
Absolutely. This last one here, actively creating the continuous feedback loops. And I want to focus on that word actively. A great thing to do when you're thinking about something like a retrospective is to set up that space at the beginning of the sprint.
Yeah.
And then communicate that to the team so that things can get captured along the way versus, oh geez, what was I thinking about during the last 2 weeks? Or hopefully you're not doing it on a monthly basis, but
If you're doing 4-week sprints, we can have a conversation after.
that's a different conversation there. But like also show that action taking as well. Like it's one thing to start that loop, but the rest of that loop is the actions that you take afterwards. So create space where you can say, here's the things that we're going to do. Let's get that in the backlog, and let's actually take some action on those as well.
Yeah, it's incredibly important. I think, again, it's structuring things. This is another area where Lucid helps, and I imagine you probably have something in the demo to show us on this. But structuring that makes it really straightforward and simple, because I've seen a lot of retrospectives fail because there's not structure to the retrospective. People show up and they just kind of like, hey, like let's just talk about what's going well, what's not going well, and there's not a home for it, or there's not somewhere where people can, to your point, go in advance and maybe pre-populate some things as they're coming up, which I think is really good. Another piece of this, again, we're talking about retrospectives a few times. It's also really important to think in terms of what might happen in the future. So, like, many have probably gone through a pre-mortem exercise, but again, it's a very similar thing of trying to create visibility to what are some of the things that, like, we know about ourselves. What are some of the things that we know about this thing that we're going to go do? How do we have open and transparent feedback and thought around that before we even get into the work, right? So it's not just the act of reflecting backward, but like, how do you take that reflect back and forecast it forward through a pre-mortem for the new things that you're expecting are going to become priorities for you?
Exactly. Yeah. All of this structure is super critical to this. And let me show you a bit of what that would look like in a quick demo here. This is actually a template that lives in our Lucid templates. So if you go into our Lucid templates, you can find this one specifically. This is highlighting a bit of what Jeff was just talking about here in terms of the structure. Having a place and already like, here's how we want to talk through things. So specifically in this one, you can see we've got 4 sections for this. What did we do well? Learning. What didn't go well? What do we want to do differently? I'm less personally bullish on a specific method. What I do encourage is simplicity in it. And some amount of consistency so that you're not having to have people relearn a different kind of retrospective every single time that they have to retrospect. You want it to focus a lot on what are we learning as a team. That's not to say don't change it, but just be thoughtful when you are wanting to change it.
Yeah, and I was going to add, I think like what I've seen is that if you get into a groove and your team is doing the types of things that you would expect out of a retrospective, like, you don't necessarily need to change. But if you're finding that conversations aren't happening that need to happen, that's a great opportunity to try something a bit different. Like, if you scan over to the right, Christopher, on your demo doc, like an example of that is like, we've got a bunch of templates inside of Lucid. There are many that you may be doing in different ways that aren't necessarily framed in Lucid. Please feel free to go and add those and contribute those. But like, here's an example of a different type of retrospective. You're looking for like, hey, what are the anchors holding us down? What are the winds at our backs that are kind of like helping us move forward? Again, it's all just about bringing out those different conversations and getting people to open up. And so if you need to find something different, there's a ton of Lucid templates that can maybe help you do that with creative retrospectives. But that's the time when you may want to throw something different on the calendars to be like, hey, like, our retrospectives the last few weeks been a little bit bland. We're going to try something new, and do something to shake things up.
Absolutely. Yeah. And maybe that is little things to shake it up, like an icebreaker at the beginning that starts
Yeah.
to get people comfortable talking with us. So, this is one of my favorite visual activities. You can find this one in here, but it's a bucket list activity and individuals ranking which one of these that they would go out and do. Sneak peek, take a hot air balloon ride, very bottom of my list. So,
I don't know why that would be.
I know. I think,
Should I tell stories about you being afraid of heights?
I mean, if somebody asked the question, then
If it comes
sure.
up in the Q&A, I can share. I will say I wasn't afraid of heights until I went in a hot air balloon ride. This is a complete tangent, but hopefully the audience appreciates this. But I had my glasses like clipped to my shirt like this as we were on the hot air balloon ride, and then I leaned over at one point to look down. My glasses fell off my shirt, and then I slowly watched them tumble, tumble, tumble all the way until they hit the ground, and then that was the moment where I was like, "Oh, we're really high up." And
Yeah.
then ever since then, heights has been a thing for me. So
Well, and that's what I
there's your
tell people.
moment about Jeff today.
Yeah. Well, they'll say, "Oh, are you afraid of heights?" And I say, "No, I'm not afraid of heights. I'm afraid of falling to my death." Moving on though, action area. We have an action area here for this one as well. So super critical for communicating that. You can see we've, used this to turn them into cards. So you can convert them to either Lucid cards or maybe Jira issues. That way it's getting immediately back into your backlog. Great stuff there to do. And then also when you're trying to focus, this can be a lot to talk through. So using things like reactions, we'll have our team go through and say, add a reaction to any of these just to show sentiment, but we really want to know where you want to focus. So add an up arrow to those things. And then that becomes where we focus our group discussion. So a couple of different tips in there for the retrospective to consider.
I think that's great. I think that's great. Thank you for putting all those demos together, Christopher. I think that's really helpful to show folks, we're not at Lucid, we're not just kind of, evangelizing some of these things from an agile perspective. We are intentionally working with our R&D organization, product and engineering to make sure that we're building a lot of the stuff into Lucid so that we can help you be wildly successful. With that, we've gone over our three topic areas. Again, focusing in on the importance of having a shared real time visibility of your work, making sure that you're connecting strategy to execution, and making sure that expectations and priorities and all that is well understood, and then getting to this culture of transparency and visibility back. So with that, we're done with like content that we want to share, but again, like we want to talk to all of you. So our team has grabbed a couple of questions that have come up through Q&A and a few other things, and so we'll maybe walk through a couple of those. If you've got additional questions, please go ahead and throw them in the chat. Thank you again to our Lucid team for like grabbing the ones that you think are most compelling there. And I'm going to pay attention to, we've actually got another board up here on the side that they're prioritizing that for us. So Chris, I'll ask you a question. Should we do this Q&A style where I ask you and then you say something and then I disagree with you?
Yes.
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 Perfect.
Best way to do it.
Perfect. All right. So, okay. So this is a great question. This is the one that I saw, but let's talk about it a little bit more intentionally.
Cool.
How do you get started creating cultural change to work out loud, especially in a business side, especially on the business side has been really challenging. Would you recommend picking one feature, template, Lucid enabled process at a time? Getting non-technical and or former Lucid chart users to engage seems to be a large hurdle.
Yeah, it's tough. And there's, I think one of the realities here is that there's so many different things to try to solve throughout it. And that's why for me personally, so I mentioned I was a transformation coach before, coaching executives on like how to transform the organization towards this different way of working. One of the biggest catalysts for that is focusing in on a really strong retrospective. And if you can just get the team talking regularly, like don't even worry about sprints yet. Let's just say every week, every other week, we're just talking about how we're functioning and then allowing them to make some decisions about, well, geez, we didn't understand this one thing here. Oh, well, it sounds like you should create a working agreement for that. And so you're sort of like able to naturally introduce some of those thoughts along the way. That's my biggest recommendation. Start there, because that's also where you can start to directly impact the culture of trust within individuals.
I like that a lot. I think also oftentimes when I hear about this challenge, I hear it like as a top-down challenge of like, hey, we're really struggling to get, some of our leader, maybe it's not like senior leaders, but it's like, product managers or, just managers of individual teams and things like that for them to buy in. Cause if we got them to buy in, they'd participate, they'd do it and they'd help everybody else do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think a really great way to start helping with that, like I was just thinking through, like, what specifically does Lucid do? Your answer was great from a general standpoint, but like, what specifically can Lucid do? And I think this concept of information radiators and like standard views, like we come from a very practical place, Christopher and I. Like, we come from a place where it was constantly like, okay, sure, agile warm fuzzies, got it, fine, but where's the business value? Like, how is this going to
Yep.
drive results for us as a business? That was constantly the question that we were being asked as we were trying to lead a transformation and work with these and be transformation coaches. And so, like, the more that I could show, hey, here's the better visibility that you have into what's happening within your teams, the more I could get them on board with being like, okay, I can actually see what's happening. Because what most people don't recognize is that once you get to a certain level of leadership, like that ability to look down into your organization and understand at a reasonable degree of complexity what is happening becomes wildly difficult. And so you're
Yeah.
constantly asking for status reports, you're constantly asking for other stuff. But if I could just go to a singular place where that visibility is there and it's consistent from team to team, it makes my life so much easier. That's kind of why we were I was going to say harping on that. I don't think we were harping on it, but that's why we were emphasizing that so much toward the beginning of the webinar is
Yeah.
that can be really helpful in driving a strong outcome there. So,
Yeah.
so I think that's a great place to start is like, how can you, if you're trying to work with leaders or you're trying to work with people who are sitting above and trying to look down into the organization and see what's going on, get them bought into this concept of like early and easy, simple visibility, consistent visibility, that may help them. And you may see them get motivated by that.
Yeah, absolutely.
A couple other things I kind of want to call out. We didn't get a ton of other questions, which is totally fine. But there were some going back to our original question because we have a couple minutes. I did want to call out a few things that I think are really helpful for maybe you, Chris, and I to discuss here. One of the things somebody called out, what's hard about visibility, this aligns a little bit with that last question. But certain teams don't want their inner workings to be transparent. When ideas and builds are in transition and development, they may not be ready to share. Do you have any
Mm-hmm.
thoughts around that? Like, so like there's definitely a time where like, hey, visibility becomes, transparency and visibility. Like there's times where maybe you don't want 100% of that. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. No, I mean, that is very fair. We get that quite frequently, even just in developing things with customers ourselves, where it's like, well, I'm interested in some feedback on this, but from people who understand that this isn't the final result, because others are probably going to judge this as the final result. So I think there's two ways to do this. One is just thinking in terms of like a review is where you would say, yeah, I want to put my final, foot forward on an end result that we're doing. And those maybe are the things that you're actually putting in here so that people can view those specific end results. But if you have work in progress, I wouldn't necessarily put that directly here on this board. What I would suggest is making clear about the state of that work, but then using that to control a bit of individuals being able to directly access something that hasn't quite been finished out just yet. So that's maybe some placement of where we would do some things there. Thinking back to that team hub space, I may put our working stuff in that document repository there, but I'm probably not going to put it directly here into my board. So consider that as you're thinking about like working stuff probably doesn't go directly here.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good add. I'm just looking at time. We're at about time. And so we probably need to wrap up. I do want to just call out a couple things. There were a bunch of things around visibility being hard. I want to highlight a couple things that are really important as you think about visibility. Is making sure that you help others understand cross-functional impacts. Like when we talk about creating visibility, how do we create visibility to constraints? If you haven't tried Lucid's new functionality around Jira and Azure DevOps and being able to bring in your work issues into Lucid and paint a really clear picture with dependency lines and all those other things, that can be really helpful in helping the organization understand those impacts. And then also using a tool like Lucid There are others, certainly, but using a tool like Lucid to where there's a centralized location where people can go, and creating, Christopher showed a really great visual of a team space where it can link out to other resources and things that people may be utilizing. But also, you could have a document that links out to all of those individual team spaces. Or those team planning boards if needed, to where people your leaders and others can go and find different directions of where to go. But with that, I think we're at about time. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Hopefully, this was enjoyable. As a brief reminder, yes, this session was recorded. Yes, you will be getting the recording and more information via email in the next few days. And we encourage you to continue to come back and engage with us again in future webinars. And certainly, I want to highlight. Again, if you are a Lucid user, if you're a customer of ours and you are really excited about some of the things that you saw today, or interested in getting Lucid experts to come help you with a particular business initiative, as I mentioned, we have this whole new set of Agile features. If you're interested in rolling that out, but feel a little daunted by the complexity of doing so or the change management associated with it, we are here to help you. So reach out to your account contacts, reach out to us directly. I know the team has put a website that we have for our professional services into the chat, so you can go there directly and ask for some help. We would love to engage with you, whether that's training, a lot more hand holding, whatever it may be. We have lots of resources to engage, to bring to the table. So with that, thank you and good luck. Go make all the things visible. So great to have you.